Hi everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and welcome to a review for a film that has now hit theaters in some limited markets, but it is, yet again, a continuation of my coverage for New York Film Festival. It feels like my coverage just keeps going on and on and on, because I'll get a few reviews out, and then something will take over my life, and then I'll have to come back weeks later. But I'm still doing reviews for the movies I saw at New York Film Festival, and because it's still award season, because these films are still coming out, I still feel like I am obliged to talk about them, even though I'm talking about them now 2 months since the festival is wrapped. Listen, I'm a busy guy, but I wanted to get on here and talk about all these movies because I am just so fascinated by all of them. And this one being one of the most fascinating films I saw at the festival, which is Luca Guadagnino's Queer, based on the novella or short story by William S. Burroughs. I was not familiar with this source material. I am obviously very familiar with Luca Guadagnino's films. If you saw my review from Challengers earlier this year, I called it my favorite film of the year. It is still probably my favorite film of the year. I mean, there are a lot of other contenders now. I saw The TV Glow, The Substance, Seed of the Sacred Fig, a lot of movies battling for that top spot, but it is still largely my favorite film of the year. It's the one that I keep thinking about the most, the one I'm recommending to people the most. So to find out that Luca was basically giving us a twofer, I mean, how many directors give us 2 movies in a year, let alone 2 movies that are so high profile, so, awards conversation driven, have big stars, have great critical appeal. I think it's been really interesting to see some of the greats. I mean, Steven Spielberg did it like 3 times, most notably for like Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, both coming out in 93. And I know the strikes and the COVID delays were a big part in why Challengers came out this year as opposed to last year, but it's still really cool that we have a director creating 2 films that are not just big hits in their own respective bubbles, but are also so different, but also still have so much of that creative tissue that connects them and makes them feel like Luca Guadagnino films, even though they couldn't be more different in premise. There are moments in each where I'm like, yep, that feels so Luca Guadagnino all in the same. And I think that's what's great about Luca Guadagnino is he's such a chameleon. He can take his own style and really cater it to different types of genres. I mean, Challengers being this really high octane sports drama, erotic thriller, melodrama, and I think he obviously has a lot of great things that he's doing technically there, but it does feel a little bit more mainstream. And then you have something like Bones and All from a few years ago, which is very art house indie horror, has a really dark edge to it. And then Suspiria, which is very bombastic with its horror. It's very big and flashy and in your face, but it still has that art house sentimentality. And then something like Call Me By Your Name, which is just dripping with eroticism and sensuality in a way that Queer is, but then Queer takes those liberties in the third act that make it something like a Suspiria when you thought you were watching something like Call Me By Your Name. And what I love about Luca Guadagnino is that through all these different kind of vehicles that he makes and that he creates and he puts his artistic lens on, it still feels like a Luca Guadagnino film. Partially the way they're shot, the way the grain of the texture of the film is, the just innovative direction in and of itself. Except for Suspiria, these films are pretty much based in reality and very realistic. They kind of live and breathe like you are just kind of opening your eyes to this slice of life. It's quite a literal term, slice of life cinema. But I think what I like so much about what Luca Guadagnino does is he finds a way to still make it stylistic. I think Challengers, it was very easy for him because he could kind of use the tennis match as a way of kind of creating these really interesting angles and shots and close-ups and split diopter shots and all those things. But then you have something like Queer, which is very much just kind of watching this guy explore this town, Mexico City. There's a reason I haven't gotten to the plot of Queer because there really is none. There's no really overarching story. And I don't know if that's because of the source material or because of just what Luca Guadagnino is bringing to the story, but it is just kind of about this guy roaming around Mexico City, having these different endeavors and kind of pursuing this one other guy. The lead man is played by Daniel Craig in what I will say right now is his best performance. I know he's got a lot of good ones, but this one is the one that I think when I look back at his career, when all is said and done, he is going to kind of shine brightest in this role of all of them because it is also the most challenging. It's the most unexpected. And I think you see him kind of tapping into some emotions and some, really devastating backstories and just very intricate details to his character that I feel like you don't get in a lot of his other roles. They always feel like they're kind of playing a little bit broader. I mean, Benoit Blanc is such a fun role, but it is a fun role. It's him kind of just sinking his teeth into something a little goofy, a little silly, and it's great. And then James Bond, obviously, he has to play a certain type of, machismo, but also a slickness and a sleekness. But here it's just so layered. There's so much going on. There's moments of weakness. There's moments of strength. There's moments of power and manipulation, but also succumbing to the power and manipulation of others that is so great to see. And then you have this layer of him being an addict as well, because he's also struggling with his own drug problem. And you start to see how that kind of, changes his day-to-day life, the way he interacts with others, the way he kind of interprets others' relationships and touch and personal engagements. And I just find it so fascinating just watching him as an actor just act and just dive into all these little nooks and crannies of this performance. But kind of back to what I was overall saying about Luca Guadagnino is that he just lets this thing breathe, and it's so great. It's just kind of this, not even cat and mouse, because there's no real thrill to it. There's no real chase. There's no excitement and energy. It's very languid. It really takes its pace. It takes its space. It lets it breathe. It is very sweaty. It's Mexico City, and you see the sweat and the dirt kind of like pouring off of people's faces. You can see the sweat in each and every pore. When the things get sexual, the scenes get sexual, you know, there is a lot of bodily fluids. I mean, if you've seen Call Me by Your Name, you probably know what to expect to a certain extent. But I do also find there to be such a great restraint from Luca Guadagnino while still bringing so much style. As I said, you know, finding these ways to frame things differently, frame things tastefully, especially in a movie that is so dominated by gay sex. I mean, that is something that is very hard to kind of not make too exploitative or too off-putting for some or too indulgent for some. You know, he does it very tastefully in the same way he did with Bones and All, in the same way he did with Call Me by Your Name. I mean, he really knows how to showcase sensuality in a way that is not just meaningful and emotional and, you know, beautiful, but also a way that is artful, that is, you know, respectful, that kind of makes all the taboos kind of fade away when you think about it and just brings a rawness and empathy to it. And I think the movie is actually at its weakest when it becomes a story, when there becomes a plot, when they two characters, when you see their relationship kind of come full circle and then they go to do something, they go on this like excursion. I think that's where the film kind of loses me a little bit. But I've heard from a lot of other people that that is where the film gets them. That is where they are most intrigued, most entranced by the film, because it also takes the biggest pivot. And I think that's what's so cool about a film like this, is that you can either settle into the groove of the first two acts, or you can be totally wrapped up in the pivot of the third act. It's something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is a really wild comparison, comparing the small little indie A24 William Burroughs novel adaptation to something like 2001, which is so gargantuan. But it is a very similar kind of vibe where you're kind of setting the pace of the place and the tone and the setting and obviously the characters and the relationships. But then in the third act is where you kind of just take things outside the box. And I really like that about this film, but it does almost feel like I could have just watched 4 or 5 hours of this guy roaming Mexico City, kind of dealing with his past traumas and demons and connecting with these other people around him. Drew Starkey plays the person that Daniel Craig is kind of, you know, making his mission, you know, trying to woo and trying to flirt with and charm and basically get with. But, you know, I do think his character is very, very subdued, even more so than a lot of the other characters around him, to where I wish there was a little bit more to that character. But I do think he is a very good kind of straight man, probably wrong choice of words, but to Daniel Craig's much more flamboyant, but still reserved, but very deeply nuanced, layered character. I mean, he very much offers a very stark, for lack of a better term, because his last name is Starkey, but a very stark opposition to Daniel Craig's character, which makes it a really engaging relationship. But I always felt that Daniel Craig's side of the story was much more engaging than Drew Starkey's. And the two of them, as I said, the third act kind of takes things into a different direction. Leslie Manville enters the picture, and she's playing a very wacky character. She is quite literally doing something wackier and bolder and crazier than you've ever seen, to where I didn't even recognize her until I remembered, oh yeah, Leslie Manville's supposed to be in this. Oh wait, that's Leslie Manville. And I think it's really cool to see that. But I do think, you know, when I rewatch this film, I'll gain more appreciation for that third act, because it just takes such a quick, you know, 180. But I also think it's really fascinating. And I think, you know, Luca Guadagnino now has earned the audience, and now he can kind of experiment, even with Challenger, something that is, like I said, very widely appealing, you know, made for a general, more broader audience than something like Suspiria or Call Me by Your Name. Even in that film, it still feels like he's pushing it, and he's trying to engage in a very interesting, different way, to where I do know people who have been alienated by that, just because he does take such big stylistic liberties. But I think also for this, because it is an adaptation of a book, it makes it even more impressive sometimes to look at it, because even though I find faults in that third act, I just think it's cool that, you know, he's able to make that out of something that is so barren, because it is, from what I've heard, a very small book. And, you know, he's able to open it up and just like give us something that you never thought you'd expect to see in this movie as you're experiencing the first two thirds of it. So it's really hard to get my thoughts very concise on this film. It's more so just thinking about Luca Guadagnino as a filmmaker and how interesting he is, and just how interesting it is that we're getting both these films in this year. I know Challengers is much more widely accepted and widely praised and more of the like 100 thumbs up. Whereas this one, I feel like it's a little bit more mixed bag because it does kind of take some even crazier liberties. But I do think it's just really cool that we do have such different offerings from a single filmmaker this year, and the fact that there are Oscar worthy things in both of them. I mean, Challengers I think is a better movie. It's slightly better written. I really like the editing choices and the direction in that, but here, I think the screenplay is very solid, but I also think the performances, I mean, Daniel Craig is phenomenal. The use of setting and atmosphere and production design here is just spellbinding. I mean, the Mexico City, just all the different villas and the hotels and the neon lights and the way they use the kind of street lamps to kind of aid in all the lighting for all the scenes. It feels very akin to like Barry Lyndon, where everything's candlelit. This has a similar vibe where everything's just the natural lighting of the streets of Mexico City. But because Mexico City offers some really cool lighting as is, it creates a really cool kind of color palette for this film. I don't know. I really dig it. It's not my favorite of the year. It's not my favorite of his films this year. I mean, it's hard to top Challengers, but I think if you're going to take something that still stays true to who Luca is and the things he's trying to say about queerness and homosexuality and eroticism that he also says in Challengers and Call Me By Your Name and Bones and All and even Suspiria, but offering something so different than those films, I think this is going to be a really cool end of the year treat for fans of that. But if you are a fan of Challengers who hasn't really experienced a lot of other Luca stuff, I think you should at least watch Call Me By Your Name and Suspiria in prep for this, because as I said, the first 2/3 of this feel very Call Me By Your Name, and the third act of this feels very Suspiria. So I think if you can at least kind of prep yourself for that, even Bones and All, which has a little bit of an edge because it's a little bit more fantastical. It's about cannibals in a way, but I think having a little bit of a primer might help here. I think for fans of Luca, though, it's going to be a really rewarding experience. And I do really, really hope Daniel Craig gets that nomination for Best Actor. I know there's like a spot open right now. It's like Ralph Fiennes, Coleman Domingo, Adrian Brody, and Timothée Chalamet have kind of snagged those first four. But if Daniel Craig can get that last spot, I will be so happy because he's very deserving. But that's my review for Queer. If you are in a market that has it this weekend, go check it out, because I probably won't be there for long, especially with all these big blockbusters circling around. But I hope you guys get a chance to see it, especially on a big screen, because that third act is so vivid and so imaginative and does go so far outside the box. It would be a real disservice to watch this on a small box on a TV. But if you have to, watch it at home. If you can, get a screener. If not, wait for it to get around to you, because I think this is one you're not going to want to miss, even if it is very different than you might expect it to be as you're watching it when it kind of reaches its final conclusion. But that is my review for Queer. Thank you for checking out this review. If you want to stay tuned for more New York Film Fest coverage, I'm so close to the end. I've got another review coming out today for a movie, I'm Still Here, Brazil's feature that they are submitting for the Academy Awards for Best International Feature. I'll have my review out for that later. And then tomorrow I will have my review out for two other films, Blitz and The Brutalist, and then we'll be done with New York Film Fest coverage. I'll give my ranking, and then I'll give my updated Oscar predictions. It's all coming this weekend. I'm going to make it a point. I'm going to make it a mission to get it out to you this weekend, so we can finally kind of tie it up with a bow as we head into the meat of Oscar season and award season, which is my favorite time of year as a film fan, as I'm sure it is most of yours watching it. But thank you for watching this review. Stay tuned for more. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more reviews, if you want to help me improve my technology, improve my work ethic and workload, and help free up my schedule a little bit. Every subscription goes a long way. Every like goes a long way. Every comment, especially in this first hour or two that this video is out and available to you, really helps this channel grow and into something that we can hopefully make even bigger and broader and more amazing than I could have ever imagined. And a lot of it is thanks to you. So thanks for watching this, and stay tuned for more. Thanks.